Uncle Bill here from DeadPit Radio, trying to put together a surefire way to determine who was the best, worst director of the 2000s. There's really only two choices. You either got Rob Zombie or Eli Roth. Back in the early 2000s, in our time period, it was a landscape where there was really two people that stood out. There were two directors that were making the majority of the films that everybody wanted to go see when it came to the new horror films of that era. And those guys were Rob Zombie and Eli Roth. Unfortunately, that's what we had to choose from back in that time period. Now, both of those guys have legions of fans, but who was really better? And I think tonight we're going to find out. I've developed a surefire system to determine who was the best, worst director of the 2000s. From such classics as Hostel 2 to 31, from the Munsters to Borderlands, we're going to go through them all real quick and figure this out once and for all. So, when we started the show back in 2005, both these guys' careers were already rolling and they both had already had big hit films. With Eli Roth, he started off with quite the impressive first film on a shoestring kind of budget for that time period, anyway. Cabin Fever came out in 2002, widely regarded as, one of the great gross out films of that era. Cabin Fever was the story of a group of kids that go up into a cabin and the water is polluted with some sort of, biological agent that gets them all sick and their skin starts to fall off. People love the film. It was a gross out film. It was a camp film. Rob Zombie coming out of the gate with probably, in my opinion, one of the best half of a film to ever be created from this time period, House of a Thousand Corpses. Film came out in 2003, and even though the studio had tons of interference with this movie, it still created classic characters that people still talk about to this day. The Firefly family, Captain Spaulding especially. The opening half of this movie with the introduction of Spaulding in the Curiosities and Oddities Museum, all the way up to meeting the family in their home, was just golden to me. Unfortunately, the last half of the film completely falls apart, and the last house on the left completely gets ripped off. But uh, it's still kind of a seminal work for that time period. Now, when we move forward, you start to look at some of these films. Really, the guy that did the most to shape the genre was Roth with Hostel. So, torture porn becomes a thing in 2005. Saw is before it. And what Roth does is he just takes Saw and he infuses it with he takes away all the storytelling elements that were in Saw and just makes a film about people being tortured. There's no characters you give a shit about. There's no story you really care about. You're just watching people being tortured. And he does that again with Hostel 2 next. He makes, in between that, Grindhouse Thanksgiving, which would later become a feature film of his. But really, Hostel 1 and 2 are the same film. And it defined that whole era of films. You had films ripping that off, Captivity and Turistas and like tons of French and foreign films that were doing the same kind of torture porn thing. Even like mainstream remakes like House of Wax were kind of copying those styles at that period of time. Rob Zombie, on the other hand, continues what would become a trilogy, unfortunately, with Devil's Rejects in 2005, which I think is probably the most fully formed and functional movie on this entire list. Devil's Rejects is a 70s exploitation ripoff from beginning to end, and it's a road movie, really. Those two things combined. But it's really a nasty film, and it really works on a lot of different levels as an exploitation film, and it expands the Firefly universe. It has a great performance by William Forsythe, and it really does well for what Rob Zombie is good at, which we'll be getting to later about what he is good at. Unfortunately, Rob Zombie follows that up also with Grindhouse and his Werewolf Women of the SS, but his next feature film is a remake of John Carpenter's Halloween and one of the biggest missteps, in my opinion, that's ever been done. He creates one of the worst remakes ever, really. A combination of really stilted ideas. One half of the film being a redneck origin story, ridiculous, loud, abrasive, film. The other half of it being an almost straight remake of John Carpenter's original. I don't know which half is worse. On the other hand, Eli Roth goes from Hostel 2 straight into the Green Inferno, which is also a misstep, trying to remake a genre, a subgenre even that is really not able to be remade in this day and age, which is the cannibal subgenre. And what you'll find with Eli Roth later when we discuss his films and his style in detail is, tonally speaking, the guy doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know if he wants the films to be comedies, if he wants the films to be, straight serious kind of films. He's not sure. And that comes across more and more as we dive into kind of his filmography. Rob Zombie goes from what I think is his biggest misstep into what a lot of other people think, even if you're huge Rob Zombie marks, a lot of people think this is his worst film. Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, a film that really wasn't even supposed to be made by Rob Zombie. It was being made by another director, and he came in kind of at the last minute to fix it. And he turned Michael Myers into a homeless transient that eats dogs, which he did eat dogs before. I don't think it was this graphic, but yeah, it's just Rob Zombie walking across the fields like Kane from Kung Fu for most of the experience of the movie. And to say that it's a disappointment, a lot of people love it. But to say that it's a disappointment would be an understatement. Roth would go on to do Knock Knock, which completely flew under the radar and has one of the stupidest performances with Keanu Reeves I've ever seen. It is slightly underrated for Ana de Armas being in it, and just the overall silly tone and way that it's made. It's a remake of a 1970s film called Death Game. So I will say, if nothing else, Eli Roth and Rob Zombie both know their 70s exploitation and grindhouse filmographies. In 2012, Zombie will come back with a film that I think is probably his most underrated feature film, which is Lords of Salem, which a lot of people hate. I like it. I think it's stylistic. I think it's got a good concept with the album showing up and the witch backstory. Good performances by Dee Wallace, Meg Foster. Even Sherry Moon does okay in it. Roth will come in with Death Wish, the Death Wish remake with Bruce Willis. If you ever want to watch Bruce Willis act with absolutely no emotion and no even attempt at, having any kind of range whatsoever, then that's the film for you. Some people like it. I think it's a huge piece of shit. Zombie will come in with his next feature film being 2016's 31. I think that may have been partially crowdfunded, fan funded, however you want to say it. It's the story of a group of travelers that get kidnapped and put in like a Running Man situation, except instead of like, fireball, you've got like little Nazis. So it wasn't very good and it wasn't very well received either. Roth does House with a Clock in Its Walls in 2018. I don't know that much about that film. He does a documentary called Finn in 2021, which is an anti-shark fishing, I guess, documentary. Haven't seen either one of those, so I can't really comment on them. Zombie in 2019 does Three from Hell, which is probably one of the worst ideas for a sequel ever conceived. At the end of The Devil's Rejects, everyone is shot seemingly hundreds of times, and dies, but they're back in this one with minor injuries. Sid Haig is in real life dying and has one scene in the film that's really hard to watch. And all in all, it's a horrible abomination of what the Devil's Rejects and House of Thousand Corpses were before it. Eli Roth comes back and does the impossible. In 2023, he makes from beginning to end a solid slasher film with Thanksgiving. It's got great death scenes. For today, it's amazing that it ever got made. It's a great film overall, and I think his best film, just just in general, his best film. In 2022, with his last film to date, Rob Zombie makes a remake of the TV show The Munsters and completely destroys any of his credibility altogether, in my opinion, with just a horrible film that tries so hard to be funny and quirky and just ends up being unwatchable and cringeworthy throughout the entirety. Eli Roth's last film, ladies and gentlemen, as we sit here, I believe has lost around $100 million. Borderlands, although it's got multiple different directors, uh, Borderlands is one of the biggest flops of 2024 based on the video game. So, all that being said, that's their filmographies in a nutshell. I left out one on zombies because it's a feature film, but it's an animated feature film, so who gives a shit? It's not good anyway. So let's get to what I'm really here for, which is the card. So the card is an overall ranking of different aspects of each director, much like Bret Hart did for wrestlers. You get 1 to 10 score on such things as look, charisma, in ring ability. On this, I've got my own setup, and we're going to rank and see who is actually better based on a set of criteria. So let's go for it. This is all subjective. This is all, I mean, it's objective criteria, but my ratings are just going to be subjective. So let's take it to the Uncle Bill Illustrator. We got the best of the worst, Rob Zombie versus Eli Roth. We're going to be talking about, you know, what is their scores, their first film, their overall style, their creativity as a director, the characters that inhabit their films, the dialogue, either the script or the way that it's delivered, their last film, the quality of their last film, and an overall kind of body of work score. And we're going to determine who is the best of the worst. Okay. First up, first film, House of a Thousand Corpses versus Cabin Fever. I give House of a Thousand Corpses a 6 out of 10 because I think the first half is so good that even though the second half I would probably give a 2 or a 3, it all balances out and becomes a 6 with how good that first half is. Cabin Fever is all the way through just a weird kind of comedy horror attempt that fails to me to be either scary or funny. It's gory in a couple of scenes, but not really even to today's standards. The humor does not work at all to me. The characters are completely forgettable. I mean, House of a Thousand Corpses, you're introduced to Captain Spaulding and Otis and Baby and all those people. And Cabin Fever, who the fuck are you introduced to? The Pancake Kid? Like, who do you remember from that film? So, yeah, 6 to 5 ratio on that. I give Cabin Fever 5 is probably being too generous, but I'm going to go ahead and put it on there. Their style. So, as you can see here, Rob Zombie's style would definitely be described as 70s grindhouse to me. He's spent his entire career ripping off Texas Chainsaw Massacre and 70s exploitation films. Now, the interesting thing about that is, even though he's done that very well because he has a background with music videos and art direction and things like that, that he can infuse into these movies that actually make it pretty entertaining to watch. To give you an idea of some of the scenes, like, watch the execution of the sheriff scene in House of Thousand Corpses, or the party scene in Devil's Rejects. Like, there's actually some talent there. Eli Roth is an odd one to me because I would describe his style as modern ripoff of Italian films with Saw mixed in. So everything he makes, even including Cabin Fever, has that horrible Lionsgate saturated, bland look to it, um, that just is so dreadfully boring and so hard to watch that even if somebody is ripping off stuff like Zombie is, I find it more entertaining than to sit there and try to watch some sort of just monotone color schemes like Roth does. Creativity. Like I said, majority of Rob Zombie's career is ripping off Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So creatively speaking, in terms of like what he's trying to do in the films with creativity, there is none. He's not making anything new. He's ripping off everything. At least with Roth, he is meshing up different exploitation styles. He's taking some giallo, he's taking some Italian, he's taking some Euro trash, he's throwing it all together in a blender and torture porning it up and trying to make something. It's like a homage rather than a just straight rip off a lot of times. I give him the edge on that 5-3. Characters, I think this should be pretty easy to guess where I'm going with this. Uh, with Zombie, it depends. If he's trying to come up with a character that's not like a caricature, that's not an over the top kind of, display of like almost like a carnival character like Captain Spaulding, he's horrible at it. He can't just write regular old friggin', people. Everything that they say, everything that comes out of their mouths is completely unbelievable, and their actions are really unbelievable in a lot of his films too. That being said, when he does hit, he completely hits. He creates like iconic characters, characters that people remember, and love to this day. Eli Roth, I couldn't tell you a character in any of his films. Right off the top of my head, I could not tell you a single character in any Eli Roth film. They're two-dimensional. They have no arc. I'll give you an example. The stoner character in Cabin Fever. He starts off a dumb asshole. He dies a dumb asshole. Nothing happens and nothing changes with any of the characters. And there's nothing memorable about any of them in any of the films. So yeah, he gets a 2. I don't remember anything. I think maybe the only reason he got a 2 was because of the Pancake Kid and putting himself in as like a hipster in Cabin Fever. That might be the only 2 things I remember from any of those films. Dialogue/script. I mean, let's be honest. Neither one of these guys is known for their dialogue or their scripts. As a matter of fact, they're both pretty horrible at writing any kind of dialogue that would actually come out of somebody's mouth, realistic dialogue in any way from their main characters to the supporting characters. It's all just a hodgepodge of bullshit. You got skullfuckery with just everybody cussing a mile a minute in all of Rob Zombie's films and just trying to be the meanest, rudest, just biggest assholes that they can be, which is just so over the top, it's unrealistic. To just weird, eccentric characters that pop up out of nowhere when I guess he knew everything else was boring as fucking sand. He just threw in Pancake Guy. But everybody else, if you think about it, um, it's just middle of the road. So I think I just I can listen to an Eli Roth movie easier than I can a Rob Zombie movie because in a Rob Zombie movie, it's like the equivalent of standing in front of like an fire hose of profanity and just being hit with it, and you just fucking can't, like, you can't take it. It's so much, like, you just gotta get out of the way. So it's not quite as bad in an Eli Roth movie, in my opinion. Last film. Boy, this is fucking tough. Um, I've had the misfortune of seeing both of these films. Rob Zombie's last film was The Munsters. I give it a 1 simply for the fact that I like the original Munsters. Eli Roth's last film was Borderlands. I give it a 0 because there's nothing redeeming about it, and I don't even know anything about the video game. So it doesn't really even deserve anything. So, what about their overall body of work? You know, if you take everything together, what would that look like? Well, here's where it gets interesting. To me, Rob Zombie has made 3 films that I like and can go back and watch. And sometimes I do go back and watch House of a Thousand Corpses, the opening, multiple times, throughout the year. It's that good to me. Eli Roth has made 1 film that I like. Overall, he has made 1 film that I like, and that would be Thanksgiving. The rest of his films, um, I don't ever go back and watch them. I never revisit them. I never have any kind of feeling that I want to. It's almost as though they're like the fog. Like sometimes it comes up in my mind, but then it quickly kind of just disperses. It has no staying power whatsoever. It is like fog. It's just kind of barely there and just goes away quickly. Um, that being said, let's tally up all the scores here real quick because I haven't done that yet. I thought that would be a fun thing to do. And we'll see who actually gets the higher score. So with Rob Zombie, you have a grand score of 30. So Rob Zombie has a grand score of 30 overall. And Eli Roth has a grand score 21. So, quite handedly, Rob Zombie is the best of the worst. I believe that too. Uh, I believe that this system is foolproof. I don't think that you can argue about this system whatsoever because it's here. It's in black and white. It's subjective data. It's quantitative data, if you will. No, but seriously, for me personally, looking at this, Rob Zombie is, even though he's got the biggest kind of missteps, he swings for the fences, man. And when he connects, he hits a home run. And where I feel like Eli Roth is bunting like all the fucking time. He's just hoping he gets on base. And he got on base with Thanksgiving, but like the rest of the time, it's just, he's popping out. It's just not good. So there it is. The best of the worst. The worst film director of the 2000s era is Eli Roth, followed closely by our buddy Rob Zombie. And there you have it, folks. Uh, Looking at this, if you like this, if you want something like this to continue, let me know. It was a project. I've been wanting to do something like this for a long time. And if you don't like it, also let me know. But yeah, check us out at deadpit.com, Into the Dead Pit, our YouTube shows. We got stuff going on every week. We got all kinds of streams going on. We got live streams, we got tape streams, we got fucking video content, everything you could want over at deadpit.com.
I'd like to tell people to thumbs up the video, Uncle Bill.
Would you?
Yes. Thumbs it up with violence and fury. and just love everything about it.
You hit the heart button, then you hit the ass button, then you hit the go fuck yourself button. Follow that up with the I don't give a shit button.
There's all kinds of wonderful shirts over at shop.deadpit.com. Simply the best horror shirts. On TeePublic, there are others, but they all suck. You can get some Dead Pit Radio shirts. You can get Last Out on the Left. The Hills Have Eyes. Texas Chainsaw. Oh, wait, you can't say Texas Chainsaw. All kinds of shirts, folks. You're gonna love them. Shop.deadpit.com.
Special thanks goes out to our supporters on Patreon. Do you know what kind of stuff you can get on Patreon, Uncle Bill, starting at only $1 a month?
What's that?
Access to every Dead Pit show since 2005. We got almost 200 fan commentaries that we've done over the decades.
We have a literal jukebox full of songs and thousands of reviews. I don't even know how many shows are up on there now that we've done over the years.
Hundreds of thousands.
You need to figure this out now and subscribe to us on Patreon and YouTube and Instagram and help us to 1 million. The road to 1 million subscribers starts today.
So deadpitonpatreon.com. Join today. Tiers start at only $1, but I'd recommend at least the $10 tier.
You can do 50. The stock market's crashing around us, folks, but send us money.